Alright guys, so on the news I saw my neighbor's car. This lady here is on NBC2, the local news for Southwest Florida, and she's complaining about how an eagle is eating her car, and all the neighbors are asking and telling the news, why would an eagle eat your car? Well, the eagle that ate her car is this same exact eagle that you're seeing in this video that I filmed 2 lots away from her house. You can see there the new construction going in, and this is only a few properties away from this lady's house. I recorded the video of this eagle, and by the way, this is a protected animal in Southwest Florida, which means that technically these builders should have never built a house on this lot. I recorded this footage over a year ago, and I just sat on it and waited because I knew one day this would be newsworthy, and sure enough it is. So the news wants to ask the people in Southwest Florida, why is this eagle attacking the vehicles? And the answer is because the eagle was there before these houses were built, and this eagle is a homing instinct animal. That means that wherever it lives, that's its home no matter what. And if you move into its territory, it will try to defend its nesting site indefinitely. I'm going to include the link to the news broadcast on my video description, and it mentions Hyde Park. Now, I didn't live on Hyde Park, but I lived on the adjacent street to Hyde Park, and I watched this eagle destroy my Yukon. If you guys remember, I had a blue Yukon. That blue Yukon was absolutely destroyed by these eagles, and the white truck that I had, these eagles also destroyed it. But the reason that these eagles are destroying people's vehicles is because they are building houses over their nest. Now, if I, the neighbor across the street, noticed that these protected animals were living on this lot inside the house after they built it, in other words, they don't leave. From the time they clear the lot, they're there, to the time they put the sand on the lot, they're there. When they put up the walls for the house, they're there the whole time. These eagles, they never leave the site because they have a homing instinct. The inspectors, the home builders, everybody that was on these construction sites was aware that these eagles are protected animals, and they could never have built these houses on these lots because the eagles were there already, and because they have a homing instinct, they are not leaving. I'll give you guys some more in-depth information about this situation. These builders, when they go into a neighborhood to build houses in Florida, the first thing they do is they buy the land. When they buy the land, before they pull the permits, they go around with pickup trucks and dump chemicals in the canals and in the ditches and anything that's water to kill the mosquitoes. This is so that when their workers are working in these sites, there's no mosquitoes around. That is illegal, but they do it at the right stage before they pull the permits. So what I'm trying to tell you is that these home builders in Southwest Florida to build these new luxurious homes are contaminating the environment, and they're disturbing the homes of species that are protected. In theory, if this eagle was there, this lot should have never been cleared, and the house that sits on it today should have never been built. So NBC2, thank you for breaking the story, but I'm going to give you guys the real story. While living in this neighborhood of Buckingham, Florida, a section of Lehigh, I witnessed developers on several occasions disturb protected species in their endeavors to clear lots and build new houses. Many times when they purchase these lots, there's protected gopher tortoises or caracara eagles in this case, and they still go on to destroy these lots and put houses in, despite the fact that the law stipulates that if there's an eagle or a gopher tortoise, they're not allowed to build. The question arises, not only who is the builder that built these homes, but also who are the inspectors who didn't see all the eagles that were there before they cleared the lot, during the lot clearing, when they started putting the foundations, when the house was built, and after the house was done and complete, they had to shoo away the eagle from the roof to take a picture of it to list it on the internet, because the eagles never left these sites. If you guys watched my Pasco County homeless camp videos, on that video I mentioned that the gopher turtle holes that were in the ground had been destroyed to kill the gopher tortoises because they were soon clearing the homeless camp to make a development. And while they could illegally evict the homeless people from the homeless camp without a warrant, they really couldn't have built on that lot regardless because there were gopher tortoises there. However, if you watch that video I made, there's a gopher tortoise that had a nest there. I don't know if it's still alive or not. Let me get this garbage out of the way in case it's still there. It doesn't get It looks like somebody caved it in. Looks like somebody tried to cave in the turtle nest. That's pretty crappy. But gopher tortoises are protected, and if a builder or developer wants to build on this site, those turtle nests, they'll come in first and they'll make sure they kill all the turtles. So, newsflash, developers are killing protected species like gopher tortoises or caracara eagles, or destroying their sites that are protected so they can build new houses, because they're not going to let an animal that's protected get in the way of their huge profits. And by the way, if you're the developer or builder, I didn't break this news story. NBC2 broke this news story, so you can figure out with them first for breaking it. I had the footage. This was recorded over a year ago, and I've just been sitting on it. And here we are, NBC2 breaks the story, so hey, they put it out in the open. There's nothing I can do about it now. It's already public knowledge. So newsflash, if you didn't know, developers in Florida are killing gopher tortoises and infringing on protected birds' nest sites so they can build their new houses. However, these caracara eagles are not going to give up their nesting sites because of their homing instinct. This is the second time that NBC2 has been on this street in the last few years. When I lived there, we were featured on one of their programs about somebody playing golf on Interstate 75. So their film crews were there about a year ago, and here they are again with this situation. And I'm just letting you guys know the truth, and the truth is that these builders and developers are destroying protected species. They'll go into a site, they'll buy a piece of land, and oh, there's 5 gopher tortoises. Now we're not allowed to build on this site. Oh, what if something happened to those gopher tortoises? That house that you're looking there in the back, there's a family living in it right now. When they build the house, it rained one day, and the entire foundation from underneath the house washed away. And I kid you not, you could park a car underneath that house. They came in with bobcats and they filled the hole back up. But literally the foundation of that house was so bad that one rainstorm washed it away. So these caracara eagles are going nowhere. And one of the reasons that I moved out of this neighborhood is because both my Yukon and my white freaking 2500 on 22s with mud grips was getting clawed up by these dang eagles. But I wasn't mad at the eagles. I was mad at the inspectors who should have known during the entire permit process there's freaking eagles hanging out at the construction site. When living in this neighborhood, I remember one time I found these bags of chemicals that were dumped all over the area where they had started building their new houses. And I looked at the bags and I looked at the chemical that was in it, and I looked it up, and it's actually a chemical that is actually forbidden to use in Florida. But they would go in and they would dump these chemicals in all these wet ditches along Lehigh Acres before they started to build their houses. So while they were building their houses, the workers wouldn't be bitten by mosquitoes excessively, because these are mosquito-infested swamps after all. So these builders, they don't care about the environment. They don't care about protected species. The only thing they care about is selling you a house for $350,000 that a few years before was $250,000. And by the way, there's no real explanation for that extra $100,000. In fact, these builders are actually pocketing as much as $80,000 per single home that they sell, when many years ago they were pocketing less than half that. So when you see these increased prices on homes, it's not that the materials cost more money. It's not that labor is at a shortage. It's simply that these builders and developers want to make twice as much money as what they were making before. So if you're wondering, if you buy a house in Lehigh, why it's so expensive, or why when you buy a house in Lehigh, a freaking pissed, angry eagle is attacking your vehicles and your property, maybe it's because that eagle was a homeowner there way before you were. And if you're wondering why, when you bought your property, there were no mosquitoes around, and now a few years later, it's a complete mosquito infested swamp, it's because before they build your community, they went in and dumped massive amounts of illegal chemicals to get rid of all the insects. So why is this story being exposed now? Well, it's being exposed now because construction's literally come to a halt, and because the labor force that was working on this construction site were mostly undocumented workers. And because of the new law in Florida, I'm sure they have to slow down their operations a little bit. Now they're on the opposite side of the law. I'm sure they probably had everybody in the bag, and now with this new law, small home builders like them are really in a lot of trouble. But now it's the big developers who are able to make most of these construction jobs happen. So small home builders are going to be disproportionately affected by this new law. I actually made an entire video on that topic. You'll see that there's a house in the background. While they were building that house, there was a female at that house, maybe Salvadorian or Honduran, who was working in the construction crew. And one day I'm riding my bicycle or my ATV down the road, and one of the workers comes up to me and says, "Hey, you see the girl that's working? Well, I'll sell her to you." Yeah. And that is the type of thing that's happening in these construction sites. I mean, these people were running all types of illicit activities, from the workers, the people that were there at these job sites were undocumented, and some of them were being trafficked, obviously. On top of that, their habits of the way they operate, it's just to destroy everything they touch. A lot of neighbors were really upset because the builders, the contractors, they would drive their big F-350s on people's lawns, not because there was a need for it, because they just wanted to do it because they could. If you actually go on the street that's adjacent to the property that was on the news, you'll see that the houses have actually put limestone rocks on the edge of their driveways because the contractors who are building these houses and the workers like to drive their pickup trucks on people's grasses just to be jerks about it. So if you come into a neighborhood, you dump litter, you leave garbage everywhere, you make noise at times when you know you're not supposed to, you drive your car on people's grasses and destroy their beautiful lawns just because you want to be a jerk, and now they go ahead and they expose you because they're tired of your crap, bringing in people to the community that are being trafficked, destroying people's grass just to be un payaso, to be a clown. You can't really expect the people in the community not to get mad at you and to kind of flip the crap out. When I bought my piece of land on this street here, in this little neighborhood that was on the news, I called the county to pull permits, and it turns out that the lady who was in charge of the permit process lived on the street behind me. She's like, "Oh, I'm your neighbor. If you build a house, we're going to be neighbors." And it's not just county officials. If you guys remember, when I lived in this neighborhood, I would always mention that the whole neighborhood was nothing but cops. City officials, police officers, people in law enforcement, retired people in law enforcement, they all live in this Buckingham community. It's kind of like a micro community for people that are in law enforcement and city officials and stuff. So here you have everybody that works for the city, works for the county, works for law enforcement, and they have to sit here and watch all these illegal activities take place at the hands of these developers that are pretty much destroying everything in their path. And you think you're not going to step on the wrong toes and end up on the news. Really, it sucked to live in Buckingham. It was nice because there were so many police officers around, so you didn't worry about like a home invasion robbery, which is very common on Lehigh Acres. But what really sucked about living in this area is that there's no internet. They're building all these brand new houses in this community, but they're all on septic tanks and they're all on well water. There's no infrastructure. Yet, you're paying almost $400,000 for a new house that's on septic, that's on well water, that's on a lot that belongs to nature because they should have never had the ability to build a house there to begin with. Buckingham really isn't a bad place. It's probably a bad place to raise kids, I'll tell you that right now. I've seen a lot of the young kids there doing some very bad things we can't even talk about on this video. But not only that, but their daddies were police officers, so when they did bad things, they got away with it. But the problem in this neighborhood continues to be the following. You have an area where they're building a lot of houses, and by the way, it's starting to slow down. It's not at the rate that it was a few years ago, but they go in there, they build all these houses, and they don't care if there's gore for tortoises. They kill them. These builders and developers have pretty much done enough to aggravate the people of this community to where now they're talking to the news about the things that are happening, and the people are angry. Look, I sold my piece of land here. I could have held onto it as an investment, and I decided to get rid of it. For one, I was worried about the eagles. If they weren't on my lot, they were kind of further to the north of my lot, but I figured eventually these eagles were going to continue to be a problem, and if they kept building houses, eventually the eagles might relocate onto my lot, and then it would have been my problem. So I sold my lot, and immediately after I sold my lot, they came in, and the house is pretty much done at this point. They actually built a huge, gigantic house on the lot that I used to own. Obviously, the most fun thing about this neighborhood is that you're allowed to drive your ATV. Well, you're not allowed to do it, but because everybody has ATVs and whatever, it's not allowed, but nobody does anything about it. I had a Honda 250, and I had a blast living out here. I mean, literally, it was the most fun I've ever had in my whole life, and I thank Buckingham for giving me this awesome experience to drive around in ATVs at midnight like a freaking maniac. It was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. You guys may have seen my videos driving ATVs through this area. It was incredible. It was a lot of fun. I love that part of it. But the reason I moved out of Buckingham, for one, I knew the eagles were definitely going to be a problem at some point. Like, anybody who's lived back there knows the eagles are just angry at the world for the destruction of their environment, with reason. After the hurricane, the river flooded. This whole area was underwater. I also did a video right after the hurricane. You can see how bad this area flooded. And then you couldn't get in or out for several days. It was a complete nightmare, unless you had a big truck, which I did, and I was able to get in and out with my truck. But if you have like a Corolla or something, you're not getting in and out of this neighborhood. So if you've ever wondered why these Florida rednecks have an F-350 jacked up, one day you'll have a hurricane and you'll find out why. I miss my truck so much, but getting from Buckingham to Naples was costing me as much as $70 a day on gas when it got really expensive, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And there it is, guys. That's footage that I recorded over a year ago, and I just sat on and waited because something told me that eventually, when they kept building houses, these eagles were going to become a problem, and here we are today, aren't we? I also didn't want to be the one to expose a large builder or developer. As a news reporter, I want to tell you guys the truth all the time, and I do a great job of exposing things that many other people simply will not expose. However, a lot of the things that I run into in the field, I'm aware if I expose them, I'm going to be disappearing soon. So they're not really worth exposing. I run into a lot of things doing my investigation work on the ground that I'm just like, oh, this is freaking newsworthy, but I like living. And even now, as I'm doing my YouTube homeless camp videos up here in Central Florida, I discover things and I'm just like, oh, here's a news story. But then I'm like, oh, I like living, and I don't want to have that many enemies. So it's a great thing that NBC2 exposed this story first, and I've just been waiting for somebody else to expose this story so I can give you guys the full drop on it. I miss my truck so much, and I'm like, I could just go into a dealership and buy another truck, and I still got my Memphis subwoofers here and install it. But I'm like, it's not the responsible thing to do. Like, I still don't own real estate, and I'm just like, I could buy one of these houses in Lehigh, but I'll be honest, I don't want them. Like, first of all, I'm not going to pay $400,000 to live in a house that's on a freaking septic field, doesn't even have a freaking city water. And then it's not worth it. It's not a good deal. Nothing about it is a good deal right now. So I'm waiting, you know, like, and like, I really want a truck, man. Man, I miss my sound system in the truck. That thing was popping, man. And then, how do you even work when you don't have good quality internet? Being that I work online, I've literally been able to double my income since I left Lehigh, simply because I can work that much faster with my proper working internet connection that I have here in Bradenton. I can be in Bradenton, Sarasota, St. Pete, Tampa, Polk County, all that in about an hour or less. And I can be in Orlando in a little bit over an hour. So infrastructure is another huge problem that this area has. It's in an area where there's nothing. There's Naples and Fort Myers, and then that's it. Drive another 2.5 hours to Miami, right? Or 11 hours just to get out of the state of Florida. There's a lot of inconveniences with living down there, and having an eagle attacking your vehicles could be one of those things that when you buy the house, just wasn't on your list of things to look out for. So to me, Lehigh Acres really wasn't that great of a place to live. The lack of infrastructure affects your life so often. There'd be times when the septic tank would, if it rained too much, or that the well water wasn't that good and they had to come out and fix it. It's just like the lack of infrastructure out there literally makes your life impossible. And while some of these new home prices may seem attractive compared to other places, trust me, you're paying for it in inconveniences. That is the word that resonates the most with living in this part of Florida. Eagle attacks are an afterthought.